and welcome to Qtr Time podcast in partnership with Carbon Jacked. I'm Lucy G.
And I'm Lucy P, and we're here to bring you all the netball goodness you never knew you needed.
We're delighted to say that this series of Qtr Time podcasts is supported by Carbon Jacked, an environmental startup that helps you combat climate change.
They are an awesome company that provide monthly memberships which plant trees, support epic climate projects, and help you to reduce your carbon footprint.
Memberships start from just £2.50 per month, so you can help save the planet for less than a cup of coffee.
Signing up is super easy. Go to carbonjacked.com and enter NetballPod for a huge 30% off. The link is in our show notes. Go check it out. Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the latest episode of Qtr Time podcast. So, Lucy G, what have we got coming up on the show today?
So we're going to do a recap of the news in the world of netball, then move on to our 3-word summaries of round 15 of the Vitality Netball Superleague before moving on to our game of the round and player of the round. Our special guest today, I was so excited about this one, is the incredible Michelle Phippard, who we'll be chatting to about umpiring, surprise, surprise, for our umpiring episode part 2. Michelle is without a doubt one of the most well-respected and decorated names in the umpiring world. We chat to her about her incredible career and her recent retirement, developments in umpiring the domestic and international game, and how the scene has evolved since she first started umpiring in the late 90s.
Ooh, amazing. Can't wait for this one. So, quick look at the news this week. Not a huge amount of major news. No like Serena Guthrie retirement stuff this week. But we did have Earth Day last week on Friday, which was amazing. And do check out our episode with Netball Scotland and Carbon Jacked as well to celebrate Earth Day.
Yeah, that was a really great episode. I love that netball's moving into this social impact space. It's really exciting. And also definitely not news, but we did have a really, really fun Twitter thread going on this week with netball pets. It's absolutely adorable. If you need a dopamine hit, go and check it out. It's the best.
Oh my God, I can't believe how cute. The bunnies have absolutely killed me. They are so cute.
It's the alpacas that got me. Oh my God.
Definitely check that out. So moving on to our summaries. Take it away, Luce.
Right, first up on Saturday was Bath versus Stars. Bath taking a 10-goal win, 50-40, and I've gone for close for comfort. This probably would have been a bit closer than Bath would have liked, but they showed great composure and determination to win the second half of the game by 9 goals, particularly after a pretty tough defeat against Rhinos at the Spring Showdown. The Bath defensive end worked overtime, to say the least. Between Pavelin, Guskov and Mawani, they racked up an outrageous 15 intercepts, 13 deflections and 16 turnovers.
Wow.
And for Stars, it was a solid performance, but they just weren't able to find that extra spark to topple Bath.
Yeah, another close game for them, though. Next up on Saturday, we had Lightning versus Sirens, with Lightning taking the win 52-46. And for this one, I said, concerns in attack. This was a well ground out win from Lightning, made a lot easier by the lack of connections and cohesions that was happening in the Sirens attack end. Just when you thought that Sirens might be on a run and going to take control of the quarter, they would just have a complete brain fart and gift the ball back to Lightning like on a silver platter. Although it was great to see Barry get a full game after injury, you can really tell how much they miss Steve McCall just getting the ball to goal and then obviously sinking those long bombs as well.
Yeah.
For Lightning, Hannah Joseph put out an impressive performance, putting in an absolute shift to counteract the missing engine of Panagari.
Yeah, for sure. It was the wing attack dominance this week, actually, I think. So following this was Wasp versus Thunder, with Thunder taking an extraordinary win, 88-57. And I've gone for mind-blowingly good. Oh, man. Manchester Thunder breaking opponents' hearts and game records since 2001. Like, wow.
That's slogan.
This game literally had it all. There was the Super League record-breaking total goals. Previously, it was held by Storm against Team Northumbria of 86. This game took Thunder to over 1,000 goals scored this season, and the next highest is Lightning with 862. So they're miles ahead of everyone else. There was a 7-24 final quarter, and it was the 100th game for both Karen Gregg and Joyce and Vula. I'm just struggling for words when it comes to Thunder. 88 goals, and they mixed things up and had Laura Malcolm in goal defence. I mean, when you're that good, like, why not?
Yeah, they just have been so ruthless this season. I really, really can't see anyone catching up with them.
Yep, I agree.
Next up on Sunday, we had Wasps versus Rhinos, with Wasps taking the win, 57-52. Go Wasps! And I said end to end. It was a really well-deserved win in the end from a Wasps perspective. They did not make it easy for themselves, and they had a lot of errors, but I was so impressed by the fire and just the fight from them to keep them going, pushing on to the win. And they actually had a 17-10 final quarter.
Wow.
The last time these two sides met, Rhinos actually won by 1. And so they will be pretty gutted not to sink this one. I mean, for Rhinos, top 4 chances are sliding away, and this just undoes all the good work against Team Bath. You know, they might as well have not won that game, and it's a pity, but it's the story of their season.
Yeah, I think that sums it up pretty well. And final game of the round was Dragons versus Pulse, with Pulse taking a really narrow win, 52-49. And I've stolen my summary off of Shaquanda Green-Knoll from her post-match interview. She said, "Come in for everybody." Oh, this game was a cracker. Neither team believed that they were going to lose right until the end. There was a phenomenal amount of heart and fire on display, particularly from Dragons, despite their captain, Nia Jones, being sidelined with an injury in the second quarter. Pulse were pretty patchy in this one, a little bit static in attack sometimes, but once they started to open up, they really got going, and a few critical turnovers in the last few minutes from Ratu and Scholes earned them the valuable 3 points.
Yeah, I loved this game. So Lucy G, which one have we gone for the game of the round this week?
Well, I've gone for that last one, Dragons versus Pulse. I thought this was an absolutely stonking game. Dragons got out to a really strong start, 8-4 in the opening few minutes, thanks to a few early glitches from Pulse, as Camilla put it in commentary. And the thing that blew my mind is that they kept Liv Cheen to just 4 goals in the opening quarter. That is unheard of. But then she went on to score 17 in the second. So they really did open up the attack end in that second quarter. I think defensively, Pulse were really present throughout the court. They had 28 deflections compared to Dragons 11, but 17 of those deflections were from their midcourt. And I think that just shows how intense their through-court defence was. Similarly, they had 5 intercepts in this game posted, but only one of those actually came from a circle defender. It was Jada Pekova when she came on towards the end of the game, but the rest of the intercepts are from the middies or attackers, so which I thought was really interesting.
Yeah, that is interesting. But something else that Tamsin was saying in the coverage was that they were getting these deflections, but they weren't actually converting them into turnovers or winning clean ball. It was like they were a little half step behind at certain points during this game.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. And I think, you know, in contrast, if we look at Dragons, most of their gains were from their circle defenders. But, you know, Shaquanda Green-Knoll, she had a whopping 26 penalties in this game. And I actually think that might be the most of anyone on court this season, possibly. But overall, I thought this was an absolutely cracking game. I really honestly had no idea who was going to take it down to the last minute. And like me and you were texting each other saying, no, Pulse have got it. No, Dragons got it. It was so exciting and exactly the type of game we want to see.
Oh, 100%. And I mean, last time these guys met, Pulse won by 13 and Dragons only put 37 on the board. So look at that turnaround, you know, for them to come so close to a top 3 team. It's really, really amazing. And I'm loving what they're putting out this year.
Yeah, for sure. Bring on 2023 is what I say. So moving on to our player of the round, who have we gone for, Luce?
So I think this game could also have been a game of the round, the Wasps' victory over Rhinos. But I think a particular player that stood out in this game was Iona Christian.
Yeah.
She was player of the match, and there's no doubting why. She was absolutely incredible. She actually started at centre in this game against Jade Clark, which I really liked. I thought she was great in centre. And Wasps' struggles have been in the attacking end this season, and with Christian in centre, they were looking really good in quarter one. They were looking in early, playing with freedom. The balls were just flying in with no time for Eri and Oyasola to set up. Clearly, I'm not a high-performance coach. I would have stuck with that combination for a bit longer, but they did end up moving Christian back to her more traditional, familiar position of wing attack with Leah Goss in centre. And that combination, we have seen a bit more. They did get on a roll. She's great everywhere, Christian. I think they could have stuck with her in centre for a bit longer because I think it was really working. But she finished the game with 29 feeds, which was the most on court. And I just can't believe that. 29 feeds.
That was the most of any wing attack in this round.
Was it?
Yep, she had the most of any wing attack in this round. The next highest was Nat Metcalf with 27 in the game against Wasp Thunder game. But I think when you compare that to the fact that Thunder had 88 goals in that game and Wasp had 57 in this, the fact that Christian managed to get more than Nat, I think is absolutely phenomenal. It just shows how much work she was putting in.
Wow. Yeah, I really loved what she put out there. And also, she forced the change from Rhinos at halftime to bring on Lydia Walker. She was just running the show by the end of that second quarter. I'm actually pretty gutted that she's no longer eligible for England. Damn you, Tamsin Greenway.
She sat there like rubbing her hands together.
I know. But why wouldn't you? Because she is so talented. Absolutely lethal on the change of direction, with the vision, the execution, everything. She had a few unforced errors in this game, but I think that's sometimes to do with more of a miscommunication rather than necessarily an unforced error per se. But yeah, I just loved what she put out there.
Yeah, I think that those unforced errors might have been because she's freaking knackered as well. Like when you play that game against Thunder and then put out this kind of shift. Yeah.
And then also when you're handling the ball so much as well. It's kind of inevitable.
Coming up after the break, we hear from the umpiring icon, Michelle Phippard. This will be part 2 of our umpiring episode, and who better than the recently retired legend of the game to take a detailed look at umpiring elite netball, with a focus on Australia and the international game.
Join the likes of Tamsin Greenway, Gia Abernethy and us to become a Carbon Jacked member and combat climate change. It's just £2.50 per month and you'd be doing your bit and helping to protect the planet.
We really think that netballers can make a difference, and so do Carbon Jacked. That's why they support this podcast. They're helping England Netball plant trees for goals scored in the Vitality Netball Superleague and are Netball Scotland's sustainability partner.
Go to carbonjack.com to become a member today and use NetballPod for 30% off. Link is in the show notes.
It is an incredible honour to be joined by the one and only Michelle Phippard on the pod. Welcome, Michelle.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Firstly, we'd like to congratulate you on such an illustrious career, which has included 182 domestic matches, 112 international test matches, including 4 appearances at Commonwealth Games and 3 World Cups. You have honestly been a stalwart of the game, and that goal attack, not interested moment is just absolutely iconic. As many people will know, you've now retired from the game, but you've still been contributing so much in terms of the ongoing conversation, particularly online, on Twitter especially. How are you finding being retired from elite umpiring?
Oh, look, actually, I think it's a lot of people have asked me lately, am I missing it, particularly with competitions starting up and things like that? And to be honest, I'm really not. I think that for me, I was quite confident that it was the right time. I think, when it's sort of a natural time to bring things to an end. And for me, it had reached a point where I think I have achieved so much more than I ever thought that I would with umpiring. When I thought about sort of coming out of the last few years and whether I wanted to go into the next cycle with the next major events, I felt like, well, what would I really be doing it for now? And is this where my best contribution is made? Or is it time to sort of move into another sphere and make a contribution to netball in other ways? And that sort of led me to the decision, I suppose. I've done it for a long time, and it has been a very strong dedication, not just in terms of time, but I think mentally, the analysis you do, the striving to get better all the time, which for me is one of the things I've really enjoyed during my career, evolving and continuing to try and get better. But it takes a lot of mental energy. So you have to sort of think, am I able to gear myself up for more of that? And then I suppose the last part of it is sort of the physical aspect too, that, you know, as the body does start to get a little bit older, and in recent years I have sort of had a few more physical niggles than I would like, which has ended up with me being diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis fairly recently, which is something I'm coming to terms with regarding treatment and just working out what my body does and doesn't like. And it's a bit of an unpredictable beast. Sometimes you feel wonderful. Other mornings you sort of wake up and you're unfolding your fingers and toes and everything's very, very stiff and sore. So, yeah, it's been a challenge to get used to being like that when, you know, my body's been fairly reliable during my career up until then. But the beauty of it is it might be the end of what I do on court, but certainly not off court. I am still involved in terms of working towards becoming an international testing panel member. I've been a cadet for a number of years and now I'm working towards sort of becoming fully fledged there. I've been on the rules advisory panel for a number of years, which allows me to sort of continue being involved in the development of the game, which is really exciting, coming up with new things and new ideas, I think, about expanding netball into other horizons that haven't been embraced in the past, like men's and mixed and Olympics and things like that. And, yeah, just, I guess, staying involved in conversations about where the sport's going and what's happening. So, yeah, there's still, I hope, a lot of ways that I can contribute.
Yeah, no doubt. And I think it's all of this, and it's your continued passion for the game that really does make you an icon of the sport. And that's why we're so excited that you've been generous enough to come on here and share your wisdom with us. And as you can probably imagine, we have tons of questions. We also actually put a call out on social media, as you saw, for people to send in their questions because you are so beloved in our game. And in case you didn't know as well, this is part 2 of our umpiring sort of mini series. We did our first round with the lovely Gary Burgess and Louise Travis. And there was just so many questions we didn't get round to. We thought we just have to do a part 2. So here we are, and we're going to take a deeper look into the world of SSN and the international game with you today. So to start with, one of the biggest changes to the sport that we've seen and spoken about time and time again over the years is the degree of physicality that we now have. I think it's fair to say that we've seen a definite increase in the speed and physicality of the game. And there was a lovely tribute to you from a member of Netball Twitter, Charlotte Burns, who said, Michelle has been a key part of breaking the stereotype that netball is a non-contact ladylike sport, which has allowed our sport to grow and evolve into what we love today. So what has your experience of this evolution in terms of the physicality been like over the years?
I think, yeah, it's a good question, I think. I'm often struck when I look back at some of the earlier games, how different they are. I do think it's one of those things that the evolution has come from increased investment in the sport and, you know, the development past the early days with our initial National League competition. We sort of went from a previous competition in the early 90s where sort of the top club teams from each state would get together and play sort of a short form tournament into what was called the Commonwealth Bank Trophy, which started in the late 90s and went through to about 2007, I think was the last year. And, you know, it was sort of the first time that the team started to move into this semi-professional environment, but even so in the early days, it was still very much an amateur sport. And I mean, from an umpiring perspective, you know, we got paid, I think, $100 a game and got taxed. So we kind of went home with about $50 in our pocket. So, you know, back in those days, it was something that you had the players very much, you know, doing what they could against all odds and against a lot of external barriers. So I guess over time in Australia, that's that professionalism growing and more money coming into the sport and the players being able to dedicate more time to their training, to have access to better facilities, strength and conditioning, personnel in general, has led to, I think, fitter, faster, stronger players who are able to, push those boundaries further. And it is very much one of those things. One of my umpiring colleagues, Mark Henning, describes it as, sort of having two Formula One cars, going full board together, neck and neck. And you're sort of always on this sort of, edge between triumph and disaster where, at any moment, it's a wonderful spectacle, but at any moment it can all go horribly wrong. And you are sort of, I think the players are always balancing on that knife edge. And so as umpires, we have to kind of keep up with that. And that evolution of physicality makes you challenge yourself as an umpire, because you need to keep revisiting, well, what interferes, especially around contact contests, what interferes when the players are this strong and this fast and this fit? What can they withstand? What can they recover from? What is the boundary with this particular level of play?
Yeah, it's been amazing, actually, the journey that netball's been on. When you think about those, 20 years ago, even, the game is pretty unrecognizable from what it is now. And even from a broadcasting perspective, I think things are so different. And we found an article with the Netball Post where you said, even at an elite level, the predilection of broadcasters to publicise big hits and controversial decisions exposes umpires unnecessarily to the evils of social media invective. Do you think there should be a level of officiating training for broadcasters so that A, they're able to provide a more balanced and informed view of the game, and B, so we can endeavour to safeguard our umpires from any negative backlash on social media?
Yeah, it's tricky, isn't it? Because you sort of have competing priorities happening there. On the one hand, if we want to see netball as a major sport, we need to see it in terms of it moving into that entertainment market. And like it or not, the entertainment market means, broadcasters and marketers looking at, what's going to sell, so to speak, what's going to get eyeballs on screens or bums on seats or whatever it is. And I guess in some ways we all like the intrigue, don't we? We all like the argy-bargy. We all like a little bit of spice in it. And I guess as umpires we sort of get drawn into that too, because we do tend to get cast as the villains of the piece, the people who spoil the fun by pulling up all the interesting stuff, or, who make mistakes. And that, we do make mistakes, obviously, as everyone in netball does. But, there is certainly in any sport a tendency to hone in on umpiring errors as being sort of game changers and game breakers. And, it's not to take away from the fact that sometimes they are. I think, we can sit there and dismiss it and say, oh, it's just one decision. But, I've come to realise over the years that certainly some decisions you make are more critical than others, depending on when they happen in the game and things like that. And we do, I think, for us, we have to own that a bit too. But dealing with, I guess, the pressure of it being part of the entertainment product when we're the people who are on the other end of it can be really tough. That does sort of make the umpires into punching bags at times when that kind of criticism is promoted as part of the game at elite levels. So I suppose the other element to that too, from a whole of sport perspective, we're still a sport that is very much a participation sport, where we rely very heavily on umpires to turn up with their whistles on a Saturday or on a Wednesday night or whenever it is to umpire those games. Otherwise, people aren't going to be able to play. So there does need to be an awareness of that broader spin-off effect into grassroots, because, we need to protect the people who are out there umpiring. We need to, protect people who are there volunteering for the sport, doing it for the love, but in some cases are walking away because they just don't want the criticism, don't want the abuse and the constant sort of pressure of feeling like every mistake is under the microscope. We need to sort of adjust our expectation to the learning curve that the umpires are on at that level, and adjust all of our expectations to what we're talking about. It's community sport, it's about fun, it's about enjoyment, and that's for everybody, not just the people who are playing but also the people who are umpiring.
Yeah, it's really interesting, actually. I think there's so many, it's quite a nuanced question, I guess. And I think when we think about it from a broadcasting perspective, I definitely think there should be a level of umpire training, even just for them to have a better understanding of the rules. Because sometimes, I'm not a very good umpire, like I'll put my hands up, but even sometimes when I listen and they're talking about like the short pass rule or something, and I know sat there that what they're saying is incorrect, and it's I think that would improve the quality of the broadcast as well.
I think for sure there are times that comments are made about decisions, and when you watch them back, you sort of sit there and go, I think replay ball is always a great one when you have a bat and a catch and the commentators all go, oh, and you're like, there is nothing wrong with that. So that, and that can be frustrating because too, again, when you go back to the influence that broadcast has, people watch that and they think that's gospel because, the commentator said it, and the commentator is usually some, very well-known ex-player. And so, so-and-so said it on the broadcast, so that must be right, and it's not always right. Yeah. So that I think is another, I suppose, tick for having sort of that raw knowledge at broadcast.
Yeah, very true, very true. And I think this physicality question is something that comes up quite a lot, and it's been a real hot topic recently, particularly around the fighting for the ball. And we've seen a couple of instances in SSN where this happens even after a whistle is blown. We saw it with Bruce and Fawns the other week, and then with Walsh and Fawns the week after. And Tamsin Greenway put out a tweet saying that she was all for the big personalities and that kind of villains, heroes dynamic, and that players don't express themselves enough. But in netball, when stuff like this happens with Bruce and Fawns and Walsh and Fawns, people always perceive it to have crossed a line. And from an umpiring perspective, where do you stand on this?
It's been very, very amusing following that conversation, and I would be a very rich woman if I had $1 for every time somebody has asked me about it in the past 48 hours. Look, I think that the players get it. The players get out there, and they're elite athletes. They're playing in a professional league. They're out there to play within the rules, and the players obviously have the primary responsibility to go out there and do what they do within the scope of the rules. But the bottom line is they're going to push it to the outer boundary, and that's where you do start to have those little incidents that happen, those little bits of argy-bargy, which are part and parcel of the game. They're certainly not new. I do think that from an umpiring perspective, where we do get to those lines and the players aren't pulling back, where it starts to become either unfair or unsafe, that's where we need to get involved. And when I say get involved, I don't necessarily mean get involved in terms of the big stick. Our first port of call isn't pulling out cautions and warnings and being draconian. But I think we need to look at the tools we have in the box to influence the tone of the game so we can just deal with that building escalation. And you might have these little incidents and it might seem a bit minor. There's, a bit of push and shove. There's a bit of scrabbling for the ball, things like that. And, of themselves, they're quite innocuous. They're nothing. But over time, those things can start to build. You have a level of frustration. You have a few things that then start to bubble up. And, it can get out of control pretty quickly in terms of there being an incident that is ugly or potentially unsafe, or where someone does something that you go, wow, that's, that has crossed the line. And I guess that's where you need to be really conscious of reading that tone of the game and recognising those smaller incidents that start to bubble and just putting something on them, whether it's a change of tone, whether it's some eye contact, whether it's a little quiet word or something like that. And it doesn't have to be much. It can just be say players or just making eye contact with the players as it starts, because as soon as they see you looking at them, sometimes they'll stop.
It's like not school kids, isn't it? Get a look from the teacher.
It's so funny because we so often get criticised about, and this is certainly not to dismiss how important tone is in umpiring, and I'm a big fan of this. Throughout my whole career, often when I watched games back, that was really something I used to study very carefully, the tone that I used and the impact that it had. And there were times when, you might look at something and say, well, what you did was right or what you said was right. And you go, yeah, but was there something about the way I said it that could have been better or more effective? Because, I'm a very big believer that good umpiring is about effective communication. So I guess it's one of those things that, we do try and get the tone right, and often we're accused of speaking to the players like they're naughty school children. There are times when they kind of act like naughty school children.
Yeah, it's those pesky defenders. We all know shooters can do no wrong. It's all down.
Oh, look, it's not always defenders, as Helen House will tell you. So
I won't hear a word against Helen Housby. No, it's really interesting. I think it's that kind of grey area between like passion and fighting for the ball, and then borderline in that aggressive, unsportsmanlike conduct. So it's a really interesting.
It is absolutely a fine line, and I think that's one of the big challenges of umpiring at any level, but certainly at elite level. How do you don't want to do it in a way where you're turning the players into, robots and any sort of reaction or any sort of display of frustration or emotion or things like that. But it's about, I guess, that staying in parameters where it's a normal reaction. It's not a spray at the umpire. And there's definitely a difference between those two things.
Yeah, for sure. And sticking with the SSN, another major talking point is, of course, the super shot. And this was brought in very close to the start of the SSN season in 2020. And there was so much discussion around the impact of the super shot, not only on the players, but also on the officiating of it and how that corresponds to international umpiring. There was something that you said a little while back. At the moment, we can't test for international badges on SSN because there have been too many rule changes. And when I read that, I thought that was absolutely wild and actually could be quite damaging to Australia in terms of producing the next Michelle Phippards of the world. So firstly, is this still the case that that's not possible? And secondly, what's your take on that?
Well, yes, it is still the case. And I mean, it's the case with any league that has significant rule variations that we can't do international testing. Certainly, it's been, I think there have been challenges around rule modifications, even around things like shortened quarters, things like that during COVID. I don't really know that it was something that was thought through very much at the time that the Super Shot was brought in. So to be clear, we weren't actually able to test on Super Netball prior to the Super Shot either, because of timeouts. So the Super Shot, I guess, kind of knocked it over the edge to the territory where it departed even further, and the prospect of testing became even more reduced. In terms of how has it affected our pathways domestically, I do think it's affected our pathways domestically for sure. It has meant that in terms of talent identifying umpires coming through, we have been limited in the opportunities we've been able to give them, and particularly given the additional restrictions on international play related to COVID, it means we do sort of have a group of umpires sitting there who, probably in time gone by would have, if not on Super Netball, on other competitions, had that chance to, go into an international competition. I still believe that the impact it has on techniques and interpretations is underestimated, because it does make a difference to the way the game is played. I think anyone who watches it will tell you that you can see it makes a difference to the way that the game is played in the last 5 minutes. And there is a change in patterns of play, which in turn has implications for umpiring in terms of where your action areas are. All of a sudden, you have these busy areas around the edge of the circle. You have decisions to make that are different to decisions you make at any other point in the game around the ball advancing as opposed to the ball staying out further. At any other point of the game, if you had a shooter just inside the circle, he wanted to pop a ball over under the post, you wouldn't hesitate to see that as an advantage in terms of it being a territorial advantage, a scoring opportunity advantage. Obviously, with something like the Super Shot, that turns it all on its head, because, okay, it's closer to the post, but it's 1 point rather than 2. So is it still an advantage? Is the player making a choice to do that? Is there an infringement that's causing the player to do that when maybe they would rather take the shot if they were getting a penalty? It brings in a lot of other issues, I think, around the way that the game is umpired, even in terms of things like, I think, consistency of interpretation around major infringements during the Super Shot period. I feel that there is more scrutiny on interactions on the edge of the circle and interactions sort of just inside during that period of the game than there are at other periods of the game. And so is that umpired differently during that period? I would say at times, yes. I think it's still very much a work in progress from an umpiring point of view, and a lot of these consequences weren't considered at all when it was introduced. So there was a lot of catch up to be done when it was sort of sprung upon us very close to the beginning of the season, and in a season that already had its own stresses with hubs and COVID lockdowns and things like that.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think there was general uproar when it was brought in that has kind of subsided a little bit now. I think now people are starting to get used to it, but it's fascinating to hear, because I wouldn't even think of that, I only really think about it from a playing perspective or maybe a little from a coaching perspective, but actually it's such an important element of the game that umpires, have this completely different switch around for just the last 5 minutes. It really brings a whole another level of context to it. But sticking on talking a bit more about international umpiring now, we've seen in recent years that there are a number of other nations who are really stepping it up and closing the gap between the likes of Australia, New Zealand and the rest of the world, not only with the players on court, but also with their officials as well. That being said, there is still a huge disparity between those nations in the top 4 and 5 and those in the lower world rankings. Do you think that the likes of Australia, New Zealand, England, etc., as national governing bodies, have a responsibility to ensure that the skills gap of officials between the top and bottom nations is being addressed?
Certainly I know that there's a lot of development work that countries, certainly, my immediate experience is more in terms of Asia and Oceania, but I also lived overseas in Switzerland and in the US. And certainly I had a lot to do with netball in Switzerland while I was there. I'm an honorary life member of Netball Switzerland. And I know that a lot of their development, particularly around officiating, comes from England. So I do think that there is a lot of work going on from the major countries in terms of the support they're giving to countries in the region who require that upskilling. So I do think that there are steps being taken in that regard. It is hard though, because it's a long process, I think, to get umpires up to speed. One of the things certainly that I've noticed in doing development work in umpiring in countries where you have a less developed netball system below their top levels is that umpires come through competition pathways, and so you sort of need a quite sequential competition pathway for umpires to umpire their way through to work towards top level. In some countries, for example, I'll use Africa as an example because I've done some work there with INF in the past. You have a situation where you have players who play at school, and then while they're at school, the teachers umpire or the teachers coach or things like that. Then if they do continue playing, which a lot of girls don't necessarily continue playing for family and cultural reasons, a lot of them then play in work teams. So you have this gap from sort of school to work teams. And so then you have these umpires who are kind of jumping from one level to a next level without there being that sort of ability to sequentially progress their umpiring skills through increasingly challenging levels of competition. And so you have kind of big gaps in development that then need to be backfilled. And for those umpires, I think it's really tough because they certainly don't have the degree of scaffold, I guess, in terms of being able to come through a pathway. And so it does put them on the back foot. So for the umpires, it's difficult for them to progress. But then at the same time, I think it's very difficult for the teams when they come into a competition like a World Cup or like an international test series where they're playing against an England or playing against an Australia or something like that, because the umpiring is so unfamiliar to what they have at home. Mm. And you notice it often at tournaments that it takes the teams a number of days to get used to the fact that the umpiring is so different, and that can be quite critical. To their credit, I think they get there during the scope of the tournament, but I do wonder what we can do to help them hit the ground running a little bit better. Mm. So, yeah, look, I think it's something that definitely needs to be addressed. Obviously, with all of these things, it's a resourcing issue to a large extent. So there's not an easy answer, but, for us to really be a world game and bridge that gap between those top few nations and then our next tier down where, there's this amazing untapped talent that, we get to see sort of once every 4 years or so at World Cup, we need to think about how we can get that investment in there.
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously, the INF are putting loads of work in terms of international umpire development. But I do wonder if there's more that individual national governing bodies can do. But it's a really interesting one. Another really interesting angle of officiating that we want to touch on is in relation to an article that you shared by the New York Times the other day about this exodus of officials from youth sport. Really great article. And that's been made even worse by the pandemic. And speaking from experience in the UK, umpires are notoriously hard to come by no matter where you're based. There will, of course, be a number of reasons for why people step away from the game, such as time commitments, little to no pay, which is something that the lovely Noli on Twitter mentioned as well as part of her question to you. There's abuse from parents and coaches on the sideline, etc. But it is a real problem being felt by a number of different sports worldwide. So what do you think that we as netball could do in terms of recruitment and retention to safeguard our sport and make sure that we do have that constant supply of officials for the game to continue to grow?
Yeah, I mean, I think that article was certainly I found it very sobering to read when you kind of are reading about these competitions that are essentially falling over because they've had people who have had this break due to COVID and then have decided not to come back. And then even when they're getting new people in, you have this sort of revolving door of someone who comes in new, isn't that experienced, gets in there on a steep learning curve, cops abuse, possibly doesn't get the support that they need, decides that they're not going to continue, goes out the door, then someone else comes in and you have this sort of continued attrition because, people don't stay long enough to, I guess, firstly, to get better, but secondly, don't stay long enough because of that things are lacking. So I guess the first part about it is that we need to find ways to protect referees from, this sort of stuff. And I think that involves being, really proactive in having a zero tolerance policy and taking really effective action against people who are, continuing to do the wrong thing. And I mean, some of the stuff that I see around football in particular in the UK. And I mean, there's sort of, the physical abuse and referees getting followed to car parks and things like that. It just makes me feel physically ill. Yeah. And I like to think in netball we're not that bad. But, the fact is that, people do take it too far. And I know that at our club we commented on the fact that, coming back from COVID, you have a lot of people coming back with various stresses in their life. And unfortunately, at times they decide that the place they're going to vent all of that is that community sport at a 12-year-old umpire, which is kind of frightening. So I think the first thing is we need to really take proactive action around it. And, I have quite a lot of chats on Twitter with Dr. Tom Webb at Portsmouth, who I met at the 2019 World Cup. And, one of the things he's talked about is, does it need to be a child protection issue, particularly when you're talking about junior refs? If you have that kind of abuse happening, do we really need to up the ante and take it very seriously? And, in some ways that seems extreme, but at the same time, when you hear about the kinds of things that are happening, maybe it's not. But then I think the second thing that we really need to do is make sure that those umpires who are coming through are supported in terms of their development, in terms of having people there who are coaching them, who are giving them feedback, who are helping them to get better every week. Because I know I find with some of the little umpires I work with at my club level, they don't like getting yelled at, but at the same time they want to know, did the person who yelled at me have a point? Was I wrong? And so one of the things I know our club works very hard on is having mentors there who are, more experienced badged umpires who can be there to watch them and coach them and give them feedback and let them walk away knowing I did these things well today and these are the things I need to get better at. So that you have this sort of two-pronged strategy of support, of protection against abuse, but at the same time providing the sort of coaching and support that helps them get better, the way that you would with players, the way you do when players come into play netball. We don't just send them out there and say, off you go play, and then they come up and they go, well, here are all the things that you did wrong. We coach them, we support them, we say, these things are getting really good. Now I want you to try and do this. And we need to kind of think a bit the same way about umpiring. And really those two things I think are strands that even go higher up when you think about, making sure that we protect our umpires and value them, but at the same time that we keep giving them that opportunity to learn and get better. And a lot of people do umpire not only out of the goodness of their heart as volunteers, but because it's something they want to do and get enjoyment out of, but feel like they're achieving something. And so we have to kind of find ways to satisfy that and give them the support they need for that.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. And I think that personal development angle is a really interesting one, because I think to an extent everyone has a natural love and a natural desire to learn and to grow and improve. And I think viewing it with that kind of lens on is really interesting. Like you say, it's not all about the money. Sometimes you just want to become experts or better at what we do. And on that kind of abuse and negativity theme, Something that I've not ever really seen discussed before, or at least that much from an officiating perspective, is around sports psychology. So without wanting to sound, a bit cliche, officials are vital for any sport to go ahead, and they're subjected to constant physical and psychological pressures, whether it's fitness demands, abuse from coaches, parents or players, as well as the staggering number of decisions that they're expected to get correct in any single game, particularly in netball, more so than other sports. What's the current level of psychological support available to umpires, either domestically or internationally in netball?
Well, I guess the short answer to that at an international level is there's nothing that's provided internationally. It's something that we have to source ourselves. At a domestic level, certainly in the past we've had access to sports psychologists. I know that some of the umpires have availed themselves of that. I certainly have at different stages during my career. I've found it, invaluable in terms of, I guess, my development and my coping strategies and those aspects of it, particularly when things go wrong, as they do. And that's both on and off the court, I guess. I mean, one of the things, I guess, around, and you talk about sort of both physical and psychological pressures, one of the pressures that you have at elite level, whether it's in a league or whether it's at a tournament, is that you are constantly being selected. It's like players, and I've chatted about this with players actually, and it's a really interesting conversation when we talked about it in terms of the similarities, because a few of them said, I've never thought of umpires like that. And I said, no, this is what it's like. That, when you're at a tournament, like a World Cup or a Commonwealth Games or something like that, every game you do, you are working towards the next game you're going to have. So that can be, and I mean, that is a pressure, and it's certainly something that at tournaments, you see it get to people if things are not going the way they had hoped, if they're not getting the games they were hoping that they would get. It is very hard to sort of regroup and get yourself back together when you miss out on that game you really, really hoped you were going to get an opportunity on. That's where I think having sports psychology and having someone that you talk to about saying, okay, well, what if it doesn't go the way that I wanted to? So, here's my perfect world of how this is all going to go. Blue skies and rainbows and unicorns and everything is happy and lovely. And here I am at the, on the gold medal game going, woohoo, everything is perfect. As opposed to the fact that, that may be very well what doesn't happen. And, you have your stumbles along the way where maybe you don't have a great performance. You get a game that perhaps you're thinking, oh, that wasn't the game I was sort of hoping to have today. To get yourself back into a headspace where you're like, well, it doesn't matter because this game is the opportunity, and so my job now is to go out there and do the best job I can on this game. I think that constant selection pressure is something that's a bit underestimated with umpires, and it's something that certainly for me, sports psychology has been really valuable for. Yeah. Recovery from mistakes while you're umpiring is a really big one. The fact that you don't have time to unpack the fact that that decision might have been wrong immediately after you've made that, and you're running down the sideline, kind of something that kind of clicks in your head after you've made the call, and you go, oh, hang on, no, I might not. And that definitely happens. And being able to sort of put things in a box, compartmentalise and say, okay, well, that's not for now, that's for later, that's gone now, because you can't get it back. And I guess the whole thing is, making one bad decision can then lead to you making 5 bad decisions if the bad decision is still looming in your head. So I guess that ability to sort of compartmentalise, but at the same time assimilate the information you need to make adjustments at the time, whether it's adjustments to timing, whether it's adjustments to vision, whatever the case might be. So, I mean, being able to sort through information is, I think, a skill that sports psych can help you with, definitely. So, yeah, I mean, for me, it's something that I've used intermittently through my career and has been really valuable to me. So, I mean, I'm a huge proponent of its worth for umpires. And I think, especially now, in elite competition, because you have those added pressures of broadcast and social media and all of those sorts of things. And, I think often the advice is, just don't look. And I mean, I guess for an old timer like me, that's probably not as hard because it's not something I've grown up with. I mean, when I started umpiring, the worst thing that happened was someone wrote something mean about you in the paper and then it was gone the next day. It was on someone's fish and chips. But, now the fact is that there's so much more chatter that you can see about your performance that's there.
Yeah, I mean, I'm absolutely gobsmacked that there's no sports psychology provision on the international level. I think that's a massive hole that absolutely needs to be filled. But what I've picked out, or what I've taken away most from what you've just said there, is the speed at which you have to be able to compartmentalize stuff and put that behind you. And I think something that separates netball from other sports is that it's impractical, like you say, for us to have something like VAR or a similar thing because of the pace of the game, which means that there's a huge amount of pressure on these two poor humans to be all seeing and to make every call correctly, which can be really, really stressful. So from a sports psychology umpire safeguarding perspective, do you think there's room for the way that our game is officiated to change, to try and relieve some of this psychological pressure?
Yeah, I mean, I think that we need to look at how it evolves. And I mean, that's probably going to be through trial and error because we're very used to doing things the same way. You know, have we reached a point with the game where we do need to look at having extra umpires? I think VAR is probably not something that is suitable to netball for a number of reasons, speed being a big one. There are some sports where VAR has enhanced it. I mean, I think sometimes in terms of building suspense and things, I know in rugby sometimes when they go, you know, with league here, when they go to the VAR with the try and the whole crowd's on tenterhooks waiting for it to come up on the screen. Or in tennis with Hawkeye, I think the challenges there are kind of quite suspenseful and dramatic, and it's all a bit exciting. So I do think in some sports it actually does add some value, but I think in netball there's just too many decisions. I think there are too many decisions. It's such a high intervention sport in terms of decisions. And so as a result of that, you know, where would you draw the line? What would you and wouldn't you be able to VAR? And, you know, I don't know, you could end up like American football where, you know, you said to play for 2 minutes and be looking at a screen for 5. And I don't think anyone really wants that to happen. So, I mean, for me, it's probably more around things like court division, possibly adding another umpire. How exactly would that work? I'm not sure. But look, certainly, you know, I think we can all agree there are spots where with the current division, the umpire who's the controlling umpire is a little bit blindsided. And as a result of that, there are certainly some patches where there's potential for more errors to be made. And, you know, is that something where it's as simple as utilising the co-umpire more? You know, we have a mechanism to appeal. We don't use it very much, but maybe we need to use it more. There have certainly been instances in ANZ over the past couple of years where it has been used quite successfully. When I've seen it, I've gone, oh, that's interesting. Interesting that there's at least the thought to do it. So, yeah, I do think those sorts of experiments probably need to happen going forward as we bring the game forward. The whole question is, you know, where do you do them? How do you do them? All of those sorts of things, and that's a challenge. But if we feel that the enhanced accuracy we might get out of that would be better for the game, then that's fine. But I think you see, and I reckon football is a big one with this, that you see sometimes, you know, whatever benefit you might get out of accuracy for VAR is detracted from in other ways. Like it has negative impacts on other aspects of the game. Cricket is another one where I think you look at some elements of the game now where the on-field umpire is almost scared to make the decision in case it's wrong when they've got VAR sitting there. You know, at times I think that it sort of hamstrings the umpire. It sort of takes away not only their authority, but at times even their confidence to make the call on the field. So, you know, there's those factors you have to take into account too. If you are going to start doing that, if you add another umpire, does that add a different level of interpretation onto the game? So then you have a third level of interpretation. Does that then mean that standardising interpretations, particularly internationally, where I think we all can agree that there are differences between umpires from different regions, does it mean that, you know, in order for us to do that, do we actually need to have a bigger focus on standardising interpretations? So, yes, there's a lot of elements to think about if you're going to go down that path.
Yeah, I think this is such a fascinating area and topic because I think there's so much happening in terms of the progression on court that we're seeing, and with things like rule changes and everything happening in the SSN as well, you know, that it kind of makes sense that at some point some kind of umpiring change will follow suit. Yeah, absolutely fascinating listening to you there, Michelle. I'm conscious of time, so we've just got a couple of rapid fire questions for you, if that's okay.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, Brill. So first rapid fire, it's from Simone on Instagram. And she said, what player or team challenged your umpiring the most?
Oh, I think I would have to go back quite early in my career for that. So when I started umpiring at Commonwealth Bank Trophy level, which was our national league sort of back in the early 90s. So we had these sort of three main teams, and Adelaide Thunderbirds was one of them. So Catherine Harvey-Williams, who was the captain of that team, and she was also the Australian captain at the time as well. And a very, very tenacious defender, but certainly had every trick in the book, legal and illegal, and a very intimidating on-court persona, particularly towards the umpires. So there's one game I can recall umpiring where, honestly, I think I spent the entire game watching her and her immediate opponent, and I don't think I can tell you what anyone else on the court did in that game. So as you can imagine, that was a particularly special performance by me. But no, she certainly was I think, a very, very challenging player to umpire. And one of the things that certainly taught me is when you see a player going for the ball with one hand, your first question needs to be where their other hand is. Yeah. Because certainly in those days, I don't know that was always the first place I went. I just went, oh, what a great one-handed take, not thinking about the fact that the other arm was probably wrapped around somebody to keep them off the ball. Whereas now I think that's probably one of my big takeaways from that early period of my umpiring.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So the second rapid fire from Melissa Carlson on Twitter. And this is a bit of a controversial one maybe, as I know you sit on the rules advisory panel. But if you could get rid of one rule, what would it be?
Oh, I get asked this a lot. Certainly for me, the one I would like to change the most at the moment at international level is the substitution rule. I think that we need to look at, certainly after World Cup in 2019, where there was sort of this use of the injury rule as a substitution rule, and a lot of, Academy Award-winning performances around hurt fingers or hopping off with pretend swollen ankles and things like that. I think it would be nice to take that sort of element of deception out of it. And I know that you've been trialling a rule change in Super League around a player just being able to call for time, and one of the things they can nominate is substitution, so injury, illness or substitution, and I believe that's been working very well. So I'm not sure. I know certainly in the past there's been some opposition at international level to moving to rolling subs because of the similarity to basketball, even though it is something we use at Super Netball, and I think it's been very successful, and I'm personally quite a big fan of it. I think it works really nicely. But certainly a change like the one that is being tried at Super League, I think, would be a real benefit to the game, because it just takes out that need to, basically lie. Yeah. And it allows teams to sort of make those strategic changes when they feel it's appropriate in the game, which I think, enhances the game, because it allows coaches to sort of, shuffle the pack when they need to. I also think, to be honest, at a grassroots level, it would be really nice to be able to sub players on and off more often, particularly with juniors, because certainly, the fact that you have to stand a kid off for an entire quarter, and a quarter can seem like a very long time when you're 8 or 9, I think it would actually be really nice to be able to move players on and off. And, when I see how it works in the other sports my kids play, the fact that you can make those substitutions more frequently is good, because it just means you don't need to leave kids on the sideline for so long when they want to be playing. So I think at all levels, changing that rule has a benefit. So it is certainly one I'd like to see change, and I think that we will fairly soon.
Yeah. Oh, that's good to hear. I 100% agree with you on that one. So next one, Elaine Lees on Facebook said, this one I find really funny. Why do defenders always get called for contact when shooters push the ball into their hands?
Oh, this happens
all the time. Yeah. All the time. Joe Harton's the worst for it.
Poor defenders, I tell you, they have such a hard life. Just ask them. Yeah, look, I do think, again, like a number of things that I think defenders feel hardly done by on it is about timing. It's about getting the hand over the ball first, and you have some players who do that beautifully well. Jiva's probably the master at that, and she'll certainly let you know if she thinks it was there first and you do it the other way. But it is, it is something that as an umpire, again, you need to be really, really on the timing of the setup when the ball is taken, where the ball is taken. Is the ball taken low? Is the ball taken sort of at a point where they can move the ball around the hand quickly? But certainly on those low takes, if you have a defender who's quick on their setup and gets the hand nice and stationary over the ball, doesn't bring it down, then yes, there are probably some instances where they may be hard done by if they're the one who ends up with the call.
Yeah, no, 100%. And so we saw online that you coached the first ever Swiss national team to win a national game. So congratulations for that. And we wondered, could we see you in netball on the coaching bench instead of running the sideline in the future?
Oh, look, I think it's been a while since I've coached, to be honest, apart from very small people. So it has been a little while. I have actually had a few people ask me if I would be interested in getting back into it this year, and I think right now I kind of have only just stepped off court, so my family would probably kill me. I think one of the best things my husband said was, don't decide you're just going to sign up to do a whole lot of other stuff now. Now you've got the extra time. Don't just feel the need to fill it straight away. So I am kind of trying to sort of sit back and evaluate options, but I kind of have had a few offers to do things. Certainly, I mean, early on in my netball life, I did quite a lot of coaching. I have an advanced coaching qualification from many moons ago. And, I love the game, and so I'm very interested in, the things that coaches do and the way they see the game. And I think having had my umpiring experiences as well, that is something that lends into, I guess, helping players make modifications that, are not only successful for them on the court, but also help them to stay in play and help them to sort of maximise the rules to their advantage. So, yeah, if it's somewhere where I can add value in the future, I certainly wouldn't say never.
Yeah, for sure. Michelle, thank you so much for your time. I know we've taken a lot of it this morning, but we could honestly talk to you about this all day. So it's been such a pleasure to chat to you. Thank you so much for coming on.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
So I officially love Michelle Phippard. She's possibly one of my favourite people ever now. I think she's just such a credit to our sport, and the way she's still contributing to the growth of our game, even post-retirement, is just phenomenal. Love her. Yeah. Before we wrap up, it's time to take a look ahead to the next week of matches, round 16 of Vitality Netball Superleague, almost at the end. This year, I know, this year we've teamed up with Sideline TV to pick our showdown of the week, highlighting two key players who we cannot wait to see go head to head. Who are we looking at this week, Luce?
Okay, so this was an interesting one this week, but we've actually gone for Stars versus Pulse game, Paige Reed versus Fumi Fudoju. For Stars, I really think that Reed is often the best on court. She is such a good playmaker. She goes to post. She's accurate. She gets subbed off sometimes, which baffles me because I think she's absolutely brilliant, and that her connection with Kat is really starting to grow and develop. And I think it was last year, in every game that Stars won, Paige Reed was player of the match. So it shows just how crucial she is. Fudoju, our favourite, should be returning to court on Saturday, fingers crossed. So it will be interesting to see how she goes. The hole that she left for Pulse after her injury initially was huge, and it's taken them quite a while to adjust. She is absolutely key for them and their finals hopes. They will not beat top sides without her, in my opinion. We almost saw an upset with Pulse and Dragons last week, and this matchup with Stars will be absolutely key for Pulse in their race to top 4. There's no room for error right now, with Mavericks, Bath, and everyone else nipping at their heels. Can Stars do it? I don't know.
Well, I don't know. They're definitely going to need the shooting prowess of both Kat and Reed for this one, if you ask me, but it's going to be great. Let us know what you guys think by heading to our socials, and don't forget to tag @sideline.tv.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Qtr Time. We can't wait to bring you even more netball chat and a wrap-up of round 16 next week.
Make sure you subscribe to the podcast and follow us on social media @Qtr Time Pod for the latest netball updates. Do get involved in the conversation online. Send us your pet pics and let us know what you think of the matches from this weekend and which players stand out for you.
We would also really appreciate it if you could take a moment to rate and review, as it helps other people to find the podcast. If you enjoy listening to the podcast, please do let us know and spread the word with your netball pals so even more people can get involved. Don't forget to check out our partners Carbon Jacked and take advantage of the exclusive 30% off Netball Pod discount on their memberships. Take care, everyone, and see you soon. Bye.